and thank you for everybody who has joined us. Welcome to our webinar on transforming care system in the South Asia and North Africa region. And I just want to do just very few comments before welcoming everybody. This panel is going to be like a speed dating, so it's very inputs. And so we're going to allow also a dialogue with the participants who are here. This is also a very important event for us because with our colleagues and our partners, we are relaunching the MENA Working Group of Care, which we had actually developed almost a year ago with the support of the Global Alliance for Care, who's present here with us, and I want to welcome everybody. And we have with us our amazing partners working on care. I want to mention UNICEF, I want to mention GIZ, I want to mention UNDP and ESCWA, and of course our colleagues, the Global Alliance for Care. I hope I haven't forgotten anybody. When we launched this, and I'm only, because it's speed dating, I'm only taking 2 minutes, hopefully. When we launched the MENA Working Group on Care in September of last year, and shortly after the war broke. So it was a little bit, it was very challenging because the context changed completely, the challenges increased, and then many challenges happened after that. We gave our attention to what civil society was doing during the war, but meanwhile we completed the first phase of the work that we had set ourselves to do on care in the MENA region. We're gathered now because we want to share with all our audience, all our colleagues, what has been happening, what we have done during the last year, and also welcome amazing partners that we are starting to work with on care. And I'm very happy that there is so much more interest in researching care, in thinking about care-centered policies, in looking at the various dimensions of care in conflict, in relation to forced displacement, in climate justice, and in situating care as an essential conversation in the MENA region. So I'm very happy that we're all here together to talk about this. And without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to my friend and colleague, Dr. Mira Kawar, the Regional Director of UNDP Arab States, for also a speed dating statement for 2 or 3 minutes. Welcome, Mary, and you're joining us from Amman.
Thank you so much, Lina, and greetings to everyone. It's really an absolute pleasure to be here in this event. You know, I would like to start by recognizing the importance of the International Day of Care and Support, which is a reminder of the critical role that care the role of care is in the sustenance of families, societies, and economies. So the main point here, and to the topic of our meeting, is that care work has been intrinsically connected to gender inequality, either because care is related to the kinds of work or the kinds of jobs which are informal, difficult, insecure, low paid, low status, or because it is about women at the family level who shoulder disproportionate burden of unpaid work. And we do know that in the Arab region, women spend an average of 5 to 6 times more in unpaid care than men, and it is the second highest in the world. So also women spend more time at overall work when calculating both paid and unpaid work. So as such, transforming care systems, or the title of the dialogue today, is needed for advancing gender equality. But not only that, it is also necessary for wider development, for eradicating poverty, for improving social policies and the financing of social policies, and especially for social protection systems, and generally having just stronger public institutions with the right services in terms of quality and quantity. I think the UN all UN agencies recognize the importance that this transformation needs a comprehensive policy framework and collective efforts. We really need to work together as UN agencies, as civil societies, and as governments as well. And I do think that UNDP is trying its best to work with others on key priority areas. This care work is part of our global gender strategy, our regional strategy and regional program. And we have been working with a network of feminist economists globally on supporting fiscal reforms with the aim of redirecting public investments towards the provision of care services. And I think this is a key issue here. So a lot has been done, but so much more needs to be done. There is not yet sufficient prioritization in the care agenda because it is so multi-layered and cross-sectoral. So we need to work together on our priorities and work also and find division of labor and how we collaborate to get all our different parts into one impact. So I hope today will contribute to the conversation in the region. And I hope that the reflections of today will lead us into some sort of vision and prioritization and means to work together more effectively. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. Before I give the floor to Dr. Mehrinaz El-Awady from ESCWA, the ESCWA Deputy Executive Secretary for Programs, I just remembered that some 20 years ago, Mary and I were on a panel and talking about unpaid work. And then one of the guys of the panel came to us after and said, could you please stop? Because if you keep talking about this, the UN is going to start doing studies on unpaid work and on women's care work. So please stop. So I'm happy that we didn't stop. And I'm happy that many people care. And I'm happy that it has become a global issue. So thank you so much, Mary.
Thank you, Lina. Are you sure it's 20 and not 30 years ago?
I think I want to ignore 10 years from our life. So Mehrinaz, thank you so much for joining us from Beirut, from ESCWA. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lina, first of all, for convening this gathering. And I'm very happy to see that we are starting collectively to come together and commemorate the International Day for Care and Support. And I really want to invite all the public to recognize and claim care and support, not as a private burden or an individual responsibility, but as a public good and a shared responsibility. We now have clear evidence, after all the good work that everyone is doing and is saying, that care work, whether it's paid or unpaid, it continues to limit women's economic participation and stands as a barrier to gender equality. This is the first fact. The second fact is that we also recognize that care forms the very foundation of our societies and is essential to ensuring dignity for all. So the two facts together are no longer points of debate. However, the pressing question is, how can we reconcile these two facts and two realities? We must continue to advance on two parallel tracks to make the best out of these two facts. The first track is about transforming care systems. This means developing and expanding care-related policies, from family-friendly measures and social protection schemes to investments in care infrastructure, just to name a few. There are many more than that. It also means integrating care into a wide range of public policies, from those addressing older persons and persons with disabilities to those on migration, taxation, and even beyond that. The second track is about advocacy and mobilization. For transformation to happen, it is important to raise awareness. People need to know and to mobilize communities to demand more equal policies. This is important to recognize care as a gender equality and a development issue, exactly as my dear colleague Mary was saying. So my call today is for all of us, UN scholars, civil society organizations, policymakers, to join forces in shaping a region where every person receives the care and support they need with dignity, where every caregiver is also valued. We don't want to be working with one group who is the care receiver and we forget the caregiver. It's both of them. and where care itself stands as a cornerstone of inclusive and sustainable development. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Mehrinaz. Again, it's really, really nice to have you with us and to be working with you on this. And now I turn to my dear friend Maha Muna. Maha, from UNICEF, the regional office. I think, yes, go ahead, Maha. You're in Amman.
Okay, so for opening remarks, I guess what I'd like to say, because we'll go in more detail when it comes to the Transforming Care agenda and the UN paper, is that it's really very nice to be part of this group. For UNICEF, we're really interested in looking at care and support. This is particularly important because often the issues around child rights are perhaps not given due consideration. Also because in our region, girls do 4 times more care and support than boys do. And yet girls are part of that forefront for gender justice and climate change, where there's really a potential with the just transformation, the just transition, to imagine a day when care will be valued. I love my colleagues' the call for shared responsibility and valued care, and where it really is a public good contributing to a stronger society. Back to you, Lina.
Thank you, Maha. And we're going to have your program just basically to present your document. So I'm going to go to Mexico City. Emilienne, thank you so much for being with us. For those of you who don't know, Emilienne is not only one of the leaders of the Global Alliance for Care, but she's also iconic. She's a feminist icon in Latin America and has been at the forefront of creating and shaping feminist funding, and she's been part and parcel of the feminist movement in Latin America. It's a great honor to have you with us, Emilienne. I'm very, very grateful. The floor is yours, and thank you again for being with us.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Lina and Asfari Institute, and I'm very honored to be here. And I am talking also on behalf of Ana Moreno, who is the Technical Secretary of the Global Alliance for Care. She couldn't be here today. She's in Geneva in other meetings, and that's why I am here, and I am very glad that I have this opportunity. Just to say that the Global Alliance for Care is a platform of multi-sectorial actors where we have governments, international institutions, academic institutions as well, civil society organizations, and of course we have care organizations as well, part of this, and some corporate sector, some of the corporate sector, which is one of the I would say key actors that we also have to engage in these care systems and this transformation of care. Just to say that at the Global Alliance for Care, you can also have a space to exchange experiences among you or with other regions. Recently, we had in Latin America the Latin American Economic Commission, CEPAL or ECLAC, conference, 16th conference for women's rights, and there was a declaration that it calls the Tlatelolco Commitments, which Tlatelolco is the name of this place where we were. It's a very iconic place in Mexico because it has, we call it 3 cultures. We have the ancient pre-colonial culture buildings there. We have a church on the colonial there, as well as the very modern buildings. That's what we call, and Tlatelolco is the name of the original language. So that commitment said that they are declaring a decade of gender equality and care systems in the region. And that itself makes a very big push to really make more available care systems and care infrastructure in all the countries of the region. And I'm saying this because this can help a lot to look at what is going on the MENA region. You have done a lot in advance, but it could be helping. We are all global south at the end, and we have similarity in our cultures. Maybe not even in some cases we have the same kind of political systems, but we have a lot of things that we can share. And that's something that the Global Alliance for Care can put in the table, jointly, of course, with UN Women and ECLAC, who are critical members of the Global Alliance for Care. Another thing that I would like to highlight is that, and I'm talking about the corporate sector, because if we don't pay attention to that sector, many women could be outside of the markets, because the business, the model of the business is not only that we are transforming care systems and that we are creating infrastructure where the states and the governments have to be the main responsibles, but it's also how the corporate sector is working, and it's a model that it's made for men and for people that it's not having time to take care of others. So that has to change. So we have also to work on cultural transformations in many fields where we are now doing or pushing a bigger agenda of care. So by saying that, I really want that this dialogue, it's just kind of the beginning of many other dialogues. And please count on the Global Alliance for Care. Asfari Institute is a member, and if any one of you want to be a member, we are very open. And thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Emilienne. And I had the opportunity and the privilege to be to attend all the activities of the Care Pavilion that happened in Mexico in August, and it was really inspiring. And I was hoping that with the MENA Working Group on Care, we could also convene a Care Pavilion back to back with another event or landmark in the MENA region. So I'm really hoping that we can do this. Emilienne, thank you very much. And the Asfari Institute is indeed a member of the Global Alliance for Care. And I would really invite you to visit their website, because there's a lot of knowledge that is it's a repository of quite a lot of knowledge and activities and initiatives. Thank you, Emilienne. Anette Funk, thank you for being with us. We're very happy to have you. Anette is the head of project of WOMENA with GIZ, and we're very happy to be working together on this initiative and the relaunch, actually the phase 2 of our work on care. So thank you, Anette, for being with us, and here's your speed dating slot as well. You're muted.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, we are tackling a really important topic. GIZ through WOMENA has started in 22 to convene delegations of all our 6 partner countries to talk about unpaid care and to bring it up to the light. And across our countries, the delegations have developed national action plans. They have implemented various activities. In Lebanon, for example, we did research. In Morocco, we collaborated with the private sector, and in Tunisia as well, to actually look at maternity leave, paternity leave, and many other things. And I could say that that actually helped to illuminate the often invisible and unrecognized unpaid care work. But of course, the care economy is so much bigger and has so many more layers. So I wanted to let you know, if you're not aware of that this year, UN Women Dare to Care program, jointly with the Arab Women Organization and us, is starting to work on a regional roadmap on the care economy in the MENA region. And there have already been 3 workshops. First of all, to decide on, do we need a roadmap? And yes, everybody wanted to. So then there have been 2 technical workshops, one on the role of nurseries in order to broaden the scope of the care economy in the Arab region, and one which I would like to highlight on elderly and disability care. Because when we talk about unpaid care work, we usually talk about, the children at home and the mother who takes care of them, but it's much broader. It's the fathers, people with disabilities. It's the elderly who do need the care as well. And that is always to 80% done by women. And in lots of households who have a person at home who does need special care, they don't receive any help at all. So I'm really looking forward, and I think it's a great timing to restart the MENA Working Group and to bring all the actors together, because our contributions, we need to do it collectively, because otherwise we are losing ourselves. And having researchers, civil society practitioners, and policymakers together is a great chance to really forward the course. Thank you.
Now, okay. Thank you, Annette. And I made exactly the same mistake. Thank you so much for this. And we are happy to have you with us. And without further ado, we're going to the work that has been done. So I'm going to hand it over to my young colleague, Carla, to lead the rest of the conversation.
Thank you, Lina, and thank you everyone for joining us. We're very happy to be joined by two amazing researchers, namely Mira Ibdah, who wrote a study related to the impact of traditional gender roles on unpaid care work and maternal health in the Middle East. And we also have Manal Hameed, who studied or did a research on girls' labor in Iraq. Today, we're going to be discussing with them briefly about the reports. And maybe we can start with you, Mira. Thank you so much for coming. My first question would be what really motivated you to explore this specific dimension of care work, looking at maternal mental health? And what is one key story or finding that you would like to share with us from the research?
Of course. Thank you, Carla, and thank you, Lina, and thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here and to be a part of the conversation. Well, to answer your first question about what motivated me, I think I was motivated by like something I kept observing in both like research and everyday life, which is mainly like how invisible care work was and how deeply it shaped women's lives and our societies. So like I grew up in the Middle East and I noticed how care has been seen as a moral duty rather than labor. And it's something that women kind of just do because like it's kind of their job. It's not like really something we notice, just simply because they're mothers, wives, or daughter. But like growing up here, what I noticed, and after also speaking with women, it became clear that this invisible work is very emotionally draining, and both like mentally and physically. And yet, like it's rarely acknowledged. And through the research I've done, I've also noticed that even more, that the women themselves, also the care workers, don't really notice it and don't even acknowledge how much of a toll it takes on them. And I also really wanted to connect it to mental health because discussions around care often focus on like the economic factor or the gender dimensions, but they kind of overlook the psychological toll. And especially like in our region in the Middle East, where mental health still is kind of stigmatized, women who carry these burdens like silently are often left without say, like a language or support for what they're going through. So I really wanted to connect all of this together. So yeah, I really like wanted to make this experience visible, to give them the space to their voices and to explore how all of their traditions, care, and like their emotional well-being connect kind of. And one story I think you asked me about like from the research, one story that really like captured me was came from like a mother that I interviewed in Jordan, where she told me that she kind of like wakes up every day before everyone and she sleeps after everyone, and in between she's expected to hold everything together. And she said that very casually, but it really captured me. And like she was describing her day, how her day involves cooking, cleaning, caring for her children, and supporting her husband's parents. All of it was expected from her, all of it was unpaid, and she didn't really even find any problem with that. And when I asked her about her own needs, she really paused and was like, I feel guilty when I take a rest. And the feeling guilty when she takes a rest, this echoed through a lot of interviews and in the answers I got while doing the research, because many women expressed guilt for taking care of themselves because their worth was tied to their care work and to their self-sacrifice, and their love to their families was measured by their care work and unpaid work. So all of them kind of felt guilty when they take time for themselves and do something that's unrelated to this care work. So yeah, lots of women like in the study experienced stress and anxiety linked directly towards that, but yet they all felt guilty. So this kind of shows how invisible this care work is and how the toll it takes on women is also still invisible and they're not even aware of it.
And can you tell us a bit more about some of the challenges you have faced in studying such private and often invisible forms of labor?
Yeah. Well, I think the invisibility I was talking about is kind of the main challenge because all of this care work happens behind closed doors. And as I said, many women like don't even acknowledge it. So some women found it strange to even talk about it as work. And they would say it's just what I do, or that's how life is. They wouldn't really acknowledge it as something they do extra or like extra work. So it was kind of challenging to have this conversation at the start with them and to describe the care work they do as a type of work. So it took some time to build trust, especially when discussing mental health, because of all the stigma around mental health, not only around only around depression and anxiety, but also around admitting that caregiving can lead to that, can feel overwhelming. Um, and yeah, like because they see it as something that they do, they don't really want to admit that it can overwhelm them or give them any anxiety. So I think that's the main challenge, and also some practical challenges I think were there, such as like reaching participants in places like Palestine and Syria, because there's a lot of instability and displacement. But even with these barriers, like what came through was a shared narrative of resilience, because these challenges also add like more of a toll on the care work, and they're still like expected to do all of this care work. But what I saw is that they were adapting, they were coping, and they were creating space for agency within all of these systems.
Thank you so much, Mira. This is, we can tell a lot about many of the challenges you have been facing. And I was also wondering, how can these findings actually inform advocacy or policy reforms, especially we know how much of a toll it takes on women in the region more specifically.
Yeah, I think this is like one of the most important thing regarding the research is that we need policy reform. And I think the first step is recognition. We really need policies that see care as essential work, not just a private family matter. So we really need to recognize that and make the difference. Also, like many participants mentioned, that they would like to see community-based support systems, such as childcare centers or even informal support groups, and that could ease their load. So I think that's something practical that like we can start doing. And I'd say at a policy level, governments and like developmental agencies should integrate unpaid care work into labor, gender, and mental health frameworks. So, for example, like to introduce more flexible work policies for women and caregivers, social protections for them, and accessible mental health services designed for women in caregiving roles, and to understand also the different cultural components that come with it. And also, I would say equally important is the cultural change. So definitely we need to raise awareness, advocacy campaigns, education programs, and media coverage should work to challenge the idea that caregiving is something that a woman has to do or it's her natural duty, kind of.
Thank you again, Mira. Maybe we can unpack this a bit more in the Q&A, but let me go to Manal. I'm going to switch to Arabic, so if you want, you can go to the interpretation. منال شكرا كتير إنه أنت معنا اليوم. حابة أسألك أول شيء إنه شو هو السبب اللي دفعك إنه تعملي هذا البحث عن عمل الرعاية specifically عن البنات بالعراق. فإذا بدك تحكينا شوي إنه ليش اخترتي هذا التوبيك، وفيك إذا فيك كمان تقولي لنا قصة طلعت كمان من هذا البحث.
شكرا كارلا. أنا اشتغلت لفترة بالمنظمة مدعومة من اليونيسف بالدعم النفسي لليافعات، ولاحظت أنه رغم الجهد الثقيل اللي يقومن به للطفلات من عمر 5 سنين إلى عمر 14 سنة 18 سنة، لكن هو عمل غير مرئي، مو مرئي غير مرئي من قبل الدولة، لو من قبل المجتمع، لو من قبل الاقتصاد، هو غير مرئي بالنسبة للمنتفعات المباشرات من هذا العمل، وهو الأمهات. دائما من يجي نتكلم عنه يقولن إنه هو عمل بسيط، وإنه احنا نعلمهن حتى يكون عندهن مهارة إدارة منزل بالمستقبل. يعني مهما يكون ثقل العمل هنا هو غير معترف به، هو غير مرئي. كذلك إنه لاحظت لما بالمجال النشاط النسوي الرعائي بالعراق، إنه أكو تراتبية بمن يستحق التحرر أولا من العمل المنزلي الرعائي. فبالبداية يتكلمون عن النساء البالغات، من نجي نطرح موضوع الطفلات يقال إنه خلي تتحرر النساء أولا، وبعدين تلقائيا حتتحرر الطفلات. فهذه التراتبية اللي احنا نرفضها اصلا بالعمل النسوي، احنا بدنا نستخدمها كاسلوب ابوي في عملنا، ان هي مو موجودة بالتفكير الاستراتيجي النسوي اتجاه تثمين العمل المنزلي او حتى الاعتراف به. وحاولت انه افهم شنو الكيفية اللي يتم التطبيع بها مع العمل المنزلي اخلاقيا ودينيا وقانونيا ويعتبر شرعي، وكيف يتم اعادة انتاجه بلا نقد ذاتي، حتى لو كان من فئات متعلمة، من فئات واعية، وبعض الأحيان من فئات هي تشتغل بالمجال النسوي أو بمجال المجتمع المدني.
شكرا منال. وفيك تخبرينا شوي عن أحد التحديات اللي واجهتيهم أنت وعم تعملي هذا البحث، especially لو أنت عم تشتغلي كمان مع طفلات، ففي تحديات أنت واجهتيها أنت وعم تعملي البحث؟
التحديات بشكل أساسي، أنا كنت بالبداية أريد أوصل للطفلات أنفسهن، أنه أنا أتكلم معاهن، لكن لاحظت أنه الأمهات كأنهم متحولات إلى سور منيع تجاه الطفلات، أنه ليش تتكلمين وياهن، شنو اللي تردي من عندهم، أنه تدفعيهم للتمرد. إحنا ما جايين نسوي حاجة تعتبر غلط أو انتهاك، حتى أنت ممكن من تتكلمين ويا الطفلة حثيرين تمردها. هذا بالنسبة فبالتالي جزء من الخطة رجعت عدلته حتى إنه ما أتكلم ويا الطفلات، فقررت أتكلم ويا شابات عندهن ذاكرة اتجاه العمل المنزلي وعندهم نقد اتجاه هذا النوع من الأعمال في نقطة إنه عدم إنتاجه من جديد. فلذلك تغير جزء من الخطة. التحديات بشكل عام إنه ماكو مواد نظرية أو مواد منتجة معرفيا مكتوبة عن العمل المنزلي هواية، بحيث يمكن الرجوع إلها والكتابة، يعني باعتبارها، يعني أقصد المصادر بشكل عام، المصادر كانت شحيحة. وإنه دائما يعتقد ان الامهات حتى بالفوكس جروب اللي سويناها انه هاي مساله تخص الناشطات، هي ما تخصنا. احنا ما عندنا مشكله، احنا ننظف بيوتنا تمام، ما عندنا مشكله بيها، وبناتنا دا يشتغلون ماكو اي اشكال. انتوا اللي عندكم مشكله، المنظمات او انتوا الناشطات اللي عندكم مشكله. فكان بالنسبه لي تحدي انه هو افهمهن أنا شنو اللي أريده بالضبط، إنه أنا ما جاية أمرض أحد، هو إنه أنا أدفع تغيير شكل الحياة اللي دا تعيشوها بمجرد إنه أنا دا أسوي مقابلة أو مقابلة معمقة. أعتقد إنه هذه التحديات أبرز تحدي، يعني اللي هو هذه المسألة الاجتماعية بالإضافة إلى المصادر.
شكرا منال. وأخيرا كيف برأيك هدول النتائج ممكن تساعد بالمناصرة أو بإصلاح السياسات بالعراق أو حتى بالريجن كله؟
النتائج اللي ممكن أن نحصل عليها إنه نحاول نسلط الضوء على عمل الطفلات، لأنه هو غير مرئي حتى بالنسبة للنشاطية النسوية، بدلالة أنه مو على مستوى العراق، على مستوى المنطقة، وربما حتى على مستوى العالم. المصادر اللي موجودة تتكلم عن النساء البالغات كيف يعانن، كيف نقدر العمل المنزلي، بس ماكو شيء يخص الطفلات. فلذلك أنه من تجي تحاول تفوكس على هذا الموضوع، أنه نريد مثلا تغيير بالمناهج التعليمية، أنه يدمج العمل المنزلي بالتفكير النسوي الاستراتيجي، نريد تتعدل المناهج التعليمية مثلا حتى تبطل الجندر العمل المنزلي أو تطبع وياه. نحاول يصير أكو حملات المناصرة تشمل نشر الوعي بضرورة الحد من عمالة الطفلات أو على الأقل تحجيمها، وأنه يكون أكو تعاون ما بين المنظمات المحلية والدولية بشأن عمالة الطفلات، بشأن إدماج عمالة الطفلات. لما نحكي عن الأعمال المحظورة على الأطفال، أنه نحاول قدر الإمكان أنه نحرك المياه الراكدة بشأن التشريعات المحلية والدولية اللي حتى تعتبر هذا العمل جريمة، ونحاول نسلط الضوء أنه يابا نحتاج المزيد من التمويل لهذه المشروعات البحثية حتى تقيسه، حتى نسلط الضوء عليه، وما نعتمد هواي على الإحصاءات الرسمية. وإحنا نشتغل عليه. ممكن نعتمد على المناهج والأدوات النسوية مثل السرد القصصي، مثل التاريخ الشفاهي. هذني مناهج تقدر توصل التجارب، توصل المشاعر اللي عاشتها الطفلات هذاك الوقت، وفكرتهن عن إعادة إنتاج هذا النوع من الأعمال، كيف يتعاملن ويا استراتيجيا إضافة للناشطات. فأفكر بهذه الطريقة أنه قد يحرك مياه راكدة بهذه التوصيات يعني.
شكرا منال وشكرا ميرا. هفتح المجال للأسئلة. I'm gonna open up the space for questions. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A or raise your hand and we can answer them. We'll give it a few minutes. If we don't have any questions, maybe we can move on to the next segment of this event, which is with the UN paper presentations. روبا تفضلي.
Yes, thank you, Carla. Actually, I have no questions, but I'm really impressed and very happy to listen to Mira and Manal. So I just wanted to intervene and congratulate them. It's like so interesting and so relevant and really so needed in our work, because this is the kind of information we lack to be able really to work on policies, or how to bring this level of households, this level of suffering, of need to the policy making. So it's just thank you and congratulations.
Thank you, Ruba. We'll be sharing the links to the reports in the chat so that whoever wants to read them, they're more than free to do so. Maha? I think you're muted.
Yeah, I'm trying very hard. Got it.
I can hear you.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much to Mira and Manal. You know, in Iraq we have 40, or in the region we have 40 million girls who are married, and girls and women who are married as children. And when you think of the impact of unpaid care, the burden of unpaid care, where girls are dropping out of school, where they don't have the social networks, they don't have the opportunity to socialize, to develop their skills. And then they drop out of school, and we're not sure if the lack of education, access to education, especially during conflict and crisis, contributes to child marriage, or if the social norms that drive child marriage contribute to school dropout, right? So it's very, very much interconnected. But the kind of research that you've both done is so, so important for us to really understand those root causes, the social norms, and really be able to address it from a rights-based approach. So really, thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Maha. Maybe we'll take one last intervention. Hiba? Are you with us? I think we lost Hiba.
ايوه سامعيني كده؟
ايه سامعينك، تفضلي هبه.
سامعيني؟
ايه سامعينك.
انا كنت عايزه اسال بخصوص التحدي الخاص بالتحدث المباشر مع البنات ومحاولة الأمهات لحجب البنات عن التواصل المباشر مع الباحثة. إزاي قدرت تتغلب على التحدي ده؟ وكنت كمان حابة أعرف عدد البنات اللي تمت عليهم الدراسة في الحالة، وكمان إيه هي التوصيات أو أهم التوصيات اللي طلعت بيها الدراسة. شكرا.
شكرا هبة. منال، حابة تجاوبيها لهبة؟
اي نعم. التحدي صراحة انسحبت، يعني أنا عدلت الخطة. كان من ضمن الخطة أنه يجب أن يكون هناك طفلات أتحدث وياهم، وحصلت وقتها عن من المعهد الأصفري الفورمة مالت نموذج الموافقة. لكن موافقة الأهل وشلون أتحدث مع الطفلة، لكن أنا واجهت صعوبة مرة اثنين ثلاثة. حسيت إنه شلون راح أكمل العدد اللي أنا مخليته، أو أنا دا أواجه هاي الصعوبة. البنات قاعد يكونن مراقبات من أمهاتهن أثناء الحديث، فهن ما دا يتحدثن بصدق اللي هن يحسن. أنا كنت طفلة مثلهم، وأنا كنت أعرف إنه أنا إذا أحكي أي شيء يخص العمل المنزلي بالبيت راح أتعاقب. فبالتالي حسيت إنه هن دا يحكين وياي، بس إنه دا يوصل لي فكرة إنه مرتاحات بالعمل المنزلي، ما عندهن شيء، بيطوروا نفسهن وهنا زينات الدراسة في راضيات رب العالمين، لأنه دا يستخدمون المجال الديني حتى يتم تطويع البنات وفق إرادتهن، إرادة الأمهات. لذلك حسيت إنه هذا مو مجدي. راح أغير أو أعدل الخطة، وأخلي نساء شابات عندهن ذاكرة وعندهن نقد ذاتي اتجاه قيامهن بهذا النوع من الأعمال. أما بالنسبة للتوصيات، مثل اللي أنا قلته بالبداية، أنه يجب أن يكون تعديل للمناهج، يجب أن نفكر بشكل استراتيجي المناهج التعليمية، زائد أنه استخدام الكوادر التعليمية حتى تطبع هذا النوع من الأعمال. لما جيت أحكي ويا ناس عاملين بمنظمات حماية الطفولة، ما كانوا يعتبرون هذا النوع من الأعمال هو أصلا منتهك للطفولة، مع أنه مجرد أني غيرت المواقع، هي نفس الجريمة، هي نفس الشخص اللي منتهك طفولته، لكن مجرد طلعته من البيت صار خليته داخل البيت. تقدم الخدمة للشخص ولي الأمر، تقدم الخدمة في داخل المنزل وليس خارجها، وليس إلى شخص آخر، ليس بمقابل أجر. هنا لا تعتبر انتهاك للطفولة. فهذا التطبيع مع عدم التفكير بأنه من الممكن ترى يجرم، أكو عندنا إمكانية. كذلك أنه يجب أن تكون هناك أبحاث، مو نقول موارد ضخمة حتى تتمول، ممكن موارد متواضعة حتى تنتج على الأقل أوراق علمية فيما يخصه. إضافة إلى أنه يصير توجيه للمنظمات الحامية للطفولة، مو تطبع مع هذا، أنه إحنا نسوي ورشنا على مود البنات يكونن في هذا الوقت مثلا مخلصات شغل منزلي، نسوي هذه الفقرة التعليمية يكون البنات خلصن هذا العمل من الأعمال. أنت جاي تطبع معهم بهذه الطريقة. هذا اللي لاحظته ما منتبهين لها اصلا، هم منتبهين لكل الاعمال ما منتبهين لها. اضافه لانه العمل اللي كان يهمني بالدرجه الاساس انه احنا بشكل نسوي استراتيجي رعائي، احنا دا نخلي البنات اليافعات او الطفلات ضمن خططنا، دا نفكر بشكل واحد واستراتيجي، دا نجمع افكارنا، دا نلملمها. اصلا لو احنا جاي نفكر بشلون نحرر الامهات ثم نرجع الى نقطة الصفر نحرر الطفلات، نفس الشيء، نفس الاسلوب اللي تتحرر به الاوطان من الاستعمار او من الحكومات القمعية، نحرر الرجال اولا وتكنيكلي راح تتحرر النساء. هذا الاسلوب اللي احنا رافضين احنا دا نكرره في مكان آخر. أنا حسيت إنه هو بنوع من الاستفزاز. لا، خلينا نرتب أمورنا. معطونا بالبداية العمل الرعائي في العراق، النشاط الرعائي في العراق يعتبر حديث، دخل لنا من 2019 تقريبا بسبب المعهد الأصفري، بسبب من النشاطات، وأنا وصلت له من خلال منظمة متأثرة بنشاط المعهد الأصفري. لكن لذلك خلينا معطونا بالبداية إحنا نعرف نفكر بشكل استراتيجي. That's it.
Thank you كتير Manal. We're running a bit out of time, so maybe we can move on to the next segment in this event. Maha and Vasu, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. It's such a good conversation already. So I think Vasu is going to share the screen as we go forward. And I have put the paper in the chat for everyone to review and for discussion. Vasu, are you able to share your screen?
Sure, Maha. I'm
Great.
just on my...
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Yeah. So with the agenda today is we'll look at what the paper says, and this is transforming care systems in the context of sustainable development goals and our common agenda. It's a UN system policy paper, and it's, I think, very, it's a great opportunity because the issue-based coalition for gender equality led by ILO, UN Women, with close collaboration with ESCWA, UNDP, UNFPA, UNICEF, and many more. We're coming together to look at the care and support agenda. So this offers us a lot of room for thought. So we'll first look at the landscape of care systems, the importance, of course, of investing in care, the impact on women and girls, and then Vasu will take us to some of the policy considerations from MENA, both looking at some of the case studies provided in the paper, as well as her own work in Jordan with the country office. And then we'll go back and look at the policy recommendations and some of the suggestions for a way forward. So the next slide. The paper really looks at care as a foundational element of society. We've heard that already in terms of economies, ecosystems, women's rights, child rights. It encompasses the support and services that are provided to individuals across all stages of the life cycle. And that includes the children, as we've heard before, elderly, those with disabilities, as well as women and men. Despite the universal relevance of care work, particularly unpaid care and underpaid care, it's still often overlooked or undervalued. And the paper helps us to understand that this work is gendered. It is predominantly carried out by women and also by girls. It remains largely invisible in economic calculations and policy frameworks. The paper recognizes the importance of care, though, as essential for building inclusive and equitable societies. And it acknowledges care as a public good and a human right. And we can begin to look and address these issues systematically, to address the inequalities that are perpetuated, and to promote the well-being for all. Also outlines a care crisis. And it's important to call it that, to recognize that these are inequalities in care that are shaped by gender, by race, by marginalization, urban, rural, economic inequalities, and that it affects marginalized communities disproportionately. There's also the division of labor, gender division of labor that we've discussed, and the lack of value of care. I really like the point that Mira made about duty, not labor. I think that's really something to investigate and to discuss. But we know that as a result, women are spending 67 additional days per year than men on work that is unrecognized, unremunerated, and underrepresented. This is from UN Women. Girls spend 160 million more hours every day in unpaid care work, domestic work, compared to boys. And around the world, women and girls provide more than 3/4 of unpaid care work, undertaking an average of 4 hours and 25 minutes per day, compared to 1 hour and 23 minutes for men. The economic value of unpaid paid work, we've discussed that. It's estimated at 10.8 trillion globally. So there's really a need for a systemic change to address the care crisis. I want us to just step back for 1 second and really take a personal look at the topic. The personal is political, as we all know, political is personal. What does it look like? Can we acknowledge it? Can we recognize it in our households? Can we recognize it in our own lives, in the biases that we bring into our own lives, the unconscious bias, perhaps? So it's really about recognizing unpaid care work first, communicating that very clearly so that we can make the kinds of policy and program recommendations. But why? Why does care and support matter? The paper suggests that we look at strengthening care and support ecosystems, and it's the next slide, because we know that this can have knock-on effects. And Vasu, if we can go to the next slide. For women and girls in terms of education, economic opportunities, for countries in terms of promoting family-friendly policies, ensuring that there is care for children, and recognizing the care children provide. To ensure that men and boys participate in caregiving, we often talk about the human right of men to be fathers, to be able to take the time off from work and to have that protected so that they can be parents, but also to give support to mothers and play a role within the household that is equal to that women play. To really able to access the family policies through supportive work policies in the public and private sector. We recognize that persons with disabilities and persons living with disabilities require community-based care. There are extra costs for support, and there is a critical need for the human assistance, the transportation, housing, and that this has to be about deinstitutionalizing and contributing to community development. And the same is for older people in some ways, but it's also different. A life of dignity, independence, functionality, to age within communities with dignity and to receive old age pensions. So it's a huge gamut of work that requires multi-sectoral solutions and an inclusive care and support system. So the paper provides us with 5 key principles to reflect on, and that's a human-based approach with a women's rights, child rights focus, also disability focus, the CRPD, state accountability for duty bearers and rights holders, universality, a transformative system, principles for transforming and having gender justice, and better systems going forward, system strengthening, and leaving no one behind, truly an inclusive system. So how do we do that? What policies would be required? And I want to hand to my colleague Vasu to help explain what the paper offers in terms of policies that can really transform the care systems. Over to you, Vasu.
Thank you, Maha. Thank you, Maha. Good evening, colleagues. I'm Vasu. I'm the Regional Social Policy Specialist for UNICEF in MENA Regional Office, and taking over from Maha. So diving deeper into this, the actual care system itself has been functioning for a long time, and it has always worked, and it's more than just a system that holds together a household, but it's also the foundational scaffolding of our society as human beings, as societies, as economies, as families. We work together because of the care system, which is informal and often invisible, as one of the speakers mentioned earlier. And as Maha mentioned, a huge lion's share of the work falls on women and girls and people with disabilities who have to take care of themselves as well as a household. So working with each other is a priority as UN agencies now and not an afterthought. And for that, it requires all of us to coordinate closely with knowledge sharing, to be able to create national strategies, to be able to create a vision, and then policy reforms which can speak to each other through the sectors. Because if you really think about it, the care sector directly impacts the female labor force participation. So we cannot just work in silos as social care reform, but we should be also working with labor economists and ILO and other agencies who will work integrated. And another thing that we often sideline is that shock responsiveness of social protection systems. It's in the front lines that women and girls are also being affected by social protection shocks. So in a very holistic way, we need to be able to address reforming care systems by providing fiscal space to be able to expand the coverage of care policies, to be able to be more inclusive, to provide more care support, and share the responsibility within agencies and private sectors and CSOs, and create a vision that all of us share and we can work together to achieve. Some of the key things that they mentioned in the paper, and I summarize it for you here, are like noteworthy policy reforms that they made, which directly impacted the care system. Of course, in 2023, 2 different amendments were introduced in Lebanon to be able to provide flexible work arrangements, and to improve the family-friendly policies from maternity and paternity leave, but also addressing provision of childcare services in private and the private and the public sector. And Morocco established gender responsible budgeting through its centers of excellence in 2013. And if we go a little bit back, Egypt was able to introduce laws which legalized that a workplace with 100 or more women should be able to provide childcare facilities. Now, all these things are more recent, and sometimes we really miss out on the larger picture. But the larger picture remains that care workers remain invisible, and in the MENA region, they spend more than 5 times of their time in unpaid care work. So let's take a little deeper dive into Jordan. In Jordan, it has a very low female labor force participation, just 14%. And over the past decade, UNICEF has been engaging with the government as well as the various actors and stakeholders who work in social protection to be able to advocate and promote care policies. And even now, it's still going, it's an ongoing thing, but right now it is front and center. And one example that we can showcase for that is the Makani program, or this is something that the Ministry of Social Development and UNICEF has been working with each other to be able to provide a childcare center through the private sectors. And this they have been able to provide in all 12 provinces with 114 different centers, even in refugee communities, even in host communities and other communities, where children can actually spend the day while their parents, or especially their mothers, will be able to access education, pursue their job, and be part of the labor force. So this is a small change, but it made a difference in terms of providing visibility for the significance that care policies have on the female labor force participation. And fast forward, in this May of 2025, Jordan launched its national social protection strategy, where it addressed 4 different pillars, which was Karama, dignity, Tamkeen, empowerment, and Fursa, opportunity, which addresses decent work and social security, and shock responsiveness. So, and the cross-cutting area, of course, are family-friendly policies, gender inclusion, gender-sensitive policies. So this is a small step, but then this is how we promote and advocate and push forward. And in the region itself, as you know, shock responsiveness is front and center, especially in a post-COVID world. And a lot of countries in the Gulf and GCC countries especially have started reforming their social protection landscape. And for that, gender and care and social care and disability inclusion has taken front and center. And this is actually a critical time for all of us to be able to work with each other to advance it even further. And the main outcomes of working with each other on strengthening care systems would be to recognize the value of care, the rights of care recipients and the caregivers, and to reduce the labor-intensive indirect unpaid care, especially for girls, especially for women, and especially for people who have to put aside their educational aspirations to be able to perform their care duties. And ultimately, I think we really need social and behavioral change to be able to address the prevailing social norms and redistribute the unpaid care work between households, between genders, and that takes community engagement, that takes long-term change, that requires long-term investment as well, not just fiscally, but also socially. And then rewarding paid care workers sufficiently, formally, and finally, representing meaningful participation of caregivers and care recipients. So this is also important that we give the mic. We should know how to be the voice for the voiceless. Yes, we're all here for it, but we should be also able to pass the mic to the actual person who would be able to give us their insight and make sure their voice is captured in all of this as well. And vision to action. Ultimately, I think it's a close call for the UN right now, as well as our agencies which work with us, the civil society, the government agency, to be able to put our knowledge and our experience and our expertise together to plan strategically, to create a unified vision. And then, of course, we need to be able to provide technical expertise and technical advisory on gender, on care reform, on social protection reform, and cross-cutting areas, providing country-specific technical advisory. And then inclusion from the beginning and not as an afterthought. We should be able to create a voice for the intended audience, to be able to mobilize them, to be able to make sure their needs are met, and towards a sustainable future, to make sure that there is sustainability, fiscal sustainability, but also capacity building, to be able to take our policy and programmatic vision forward, to create that momentum, not just within us, but also beyond us.
Thank you,
And a call to
Vasu.
action. Over to you, Maha.
So just to end, the paper provides a call to action: collective responsibility, embedding care in policies, care is a human right, and the urgent need for investment in care. So thank you so much, Lina and Carla. Today we've talked about the importance of care work, the UN policy framework, the call to action. And we really look forward to the discussion now to see how we can collaborate with other UN agencies, with the strong NGOs that are in some ways ahead, and with government partners. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Maha and Vasu, for your presentation. Now we're going to move to Rania Tarazi, who is the gender team leader at UNDP in the Arab States more specifically, and she will be sharing with us some findings from upcoming UNDP research on unpaid care work in the region. Rania, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Carla, and to Lina as well. I'll try to be brief. Just one second, let me... Apologies, I'm trying to expand the screen. I hope you can see full screen now.
Yes.
So I will be sharing insights from a couple of technical papers that UNDP has been working on unpaid care work in the region in collaboration with the Economic Research Forum. The first paper looks at the impact of unpaid care work on labor market outcomes in Jordan and in Palestine. And the second paper looks at teleworkability and unpaid care work in Egypt, Jordan, and Tunisia. I will not talk about the premise because we already talked about the premise, but specifically here we're looking at the connections between unpaid care work and labor market participation, as well as the impact of participating in certain types of jobs on unpaid care work of women. So the two papers attempt to shed light on this relationship and explore viable policy options, but also offer recommendations for research. The first paper, which looked at the impact of unpaid care work on labor market outcomes in Jordan and Palestine, explored that relationship between the unpaid care responsibilities in the households and the low labor force participation rate among women, with a focus on married women. And it also looked at relevant policies in both countries, particularly child provisions and social security laws. And obviously the data that was used is based on what is available. And in Palestine, obviously this was before October 2023. So the key findings of the study show that in both Jordan and Palestine, the time allocated to unpaid care work, when we look at marital status and gender, show large disparities, not only between men and women, but also significant disparities between single women and married women. So while the disparity is huge between men and women, there is also significant disparity between single women and married women that we do not see between single women and single men. So that disparity is less significant. The second finding is that there was mixed results when we looked at the differential time spent on caring for households that have elderly and persons with disability compared to those who don't. So these were some interesting findings where there was some significance relationship between the increase on the time that single women spend in Palestine when there are people with disabilities in the households. Whereas in Jordan, this effect was on married men and married women and single men. When we looked at the elderly, there was a significance for a decrease of time spent on care work for married women and an increase for single women. This is there was no significance in Palestine. This is a curious finding, and it needs further interpretation and breakdown. The third finding is what we already also know generally, is that marital status is a decisive factor for men and women when they join and exit the labor market. So while we know this, this study is providing some evidence that first shows that men and women, married women, suffer a larger double burden of work, which is the combined paid and unpaid care work, which is 18 hours in Jordan and 10 hours in Palestine, compared to their male peers. Whereas this double burden effect is much less for single cohorts. In Palestine, it's almost not there, and it is quite minimal in Jordan. So a single woman bear only 1.5 hours more than their peer men, respectively, in Jordan and Palestine. It also shows that relative to single women, the probability of married women joining the labor force decreases by about 19% in Jordan and 26% in Palestine, whereas married men are more likely to join the labor market than single men, with a probability of 24% increase in Jordan and 26% in Palestine. When looking across time, the data from Jordan also shows that moving from being single to being married over time increases the probability of women exiting the labor force and decreases the probability of joining the labor force, while the opposite is true for men. And the same trend is seen in Palestine. So the fourth finding, is that there is a correlation between an increase in time that married women in Jordan and Palestine allocate to unpaid care work and reduced likelihood to join the labor force. So the results are showing that the time allocated to paid care work increase by 1 standard deviation, which is 23 hours per week. The increase in time by 1 standard deviation in Jordan decreases the possibility of joining the labor force. And similarly for Palestine, but with different figures. I don't want to bubble with the figures. So this means that the more married women are spending on unpaid care work is reducing the likelihood to join the labor force, which we know is very low in the region. The study also looked at some of the policy responses in both Jordan and Palestine, looking at many of the things that were mentioned as in the recommendations, like maternity leaves and their coverage. So in Jordan, the maternity leave was increased to 90 days, which is more than 12 weeks, matching the duration in the private sector with that of the public sector. But what is interesting about Jordan is the coverage, and that is covered through the social security contributions paid by employers. The caveat here is that you have around 1/3 of women who are not covered, of working women or employed women who are not covered with Social Security or not registered, so they cannot access this. In Palestine, it is more restrictive, so there are conditions that make a woman eligible for the 10-week maternity leave in the private sector, whereas in the public sector, there are no such conditions. In Jordan, also, what's interesting is the social protection system of maternity insurance of 2020, which mandated covering childcare services, so providing monthly childcare benefits for women upon completion of the maternity leave for a period of 6 months. There are some limitations on age. And the Social Security also, by law at least, subsidizes registered childcare centers, operational costs up to 50% under certain conditions. Paternity leave is discretionary and not required by law for private sector employees in Jordan or Palestine. But when it comes to public sector, there is a 3-day paternity leave, which we know is symbolic, but it's a start. We know that access to childcare services is still lacking, especially for young children. Some data is available for Jordan, and we noticed that women who are employed are the ones who have more demand for childcare services, understandably. Whereas in Palestine, the data for young children is lacking, but we also know that services are low, and that also the demand is more by employed women and by highly educated women. In terms of flexible working arrangements, this is available in Jordan, in terms of remote work, part-time work, flexible hours, but not in Palestine. So the second study looked at teleworkability and unpaid care work in the 3 countries, Egypt, Jordan, and Tunisia. And this is really means the jobs that you are able to do remotely, teleworkable jobs that you can do, of course, that are enabled through digital technologies, but are not digital jobs. So any administrative task, for example, falls under that. And this is also coming from what we have seen during COVID, where some women were managed to keep their jobs and in the region due to being able to work remotely, and even as more than men during that period. So this study attempted to look at the effects of women and their spouses' engagement in these teleworkable occupations on unpaid care work, because it's not clear. Sometimes we say that we want to encourage telework because it will allow women to have more work-life balance and be able to keep their jobs and skip all the transport and commute. However, on the other hand, there is also the argument and some research that finds the opposite, where it might actually lead to increase in unpaid care work or not being able to balance care responsibilities with work responsibilities and have a negative impact on the well-being of women. So the findings show that first, women are more likely in those 3 countries to have teleworkable jobs than men. And this is also higher among educated women, upper wealth quintiles, women in urban areas and in industries other than agriculture. And I think this is understandable. We also saw that women's time that is spent on care work is rigid. It does not significantly change. There is no significance in the results in terms of the degree to which the occupation is potentially teleworkable. And here, of course, we have to define what teleworkable jobs mean and compare to actual telework that was done through research during the COVID time, which confirmed also the inelasticity of unpaid care work to teleworkable occupations. Similarly, even if the spouse was in a teleworkable job, this does not increase or decrease unpaid care work. It had no impact. What actually has impact is the marital status, family composition, which we also saw in the previous study, and the increase in unpaid care work when the number of children increase, and especially young children, younger children. So there were policy recommendations. I think they were specific to the studies. Many of them you already mentioned, so I'll be brief here, like looking at, aligning maternity leaves with standards, placing more paternity leaves, but working on cultural shifts so that they really are effective, because if not, they will not be effective. Access to high quality childcare services is obvious. The statutory maternity insurance is recommended and covered by solidarity mechanisms. So this was a good case in Jordan, and actually a draft law in Palestine that never saw the light due to social protests that wanted to cover the maternity insurance through social security contributions. But here the recommendation is actually to do that so that it doesn't, and not rely on private employers, so that it has no effect on employment of women by private employers. Funding care services, subsidizing such care services also recommended, which is a good example of Jordan. It's a start, but the recommendation is to reach up to the age of 3, not just 6 months. And also financing these through social solidarity mechanisms as well. And finally, enforcing, I think that's not finally, like I have another page, but enforcing the measures of coverage of social security so that women can benefit. In terms of the bulk of unpaid care work that we have seen was mostly in indirect tasks. Of course, this is also based on the data that we have used, but this also needs a policy response for the redistribution reduction in terms of looking at challenging the gender roles through norms change, cultural shifts, but also providing market-based domestic care services, quality, and hopefully with good jobs that can reduce this work, and also in some situations, especially in marginalized communities, providing electrical appliances that will save the time. Cultural shifts everybody talked about, and also we saw that since there is demand by employed women, you can also create more demand. So it's an opportunity actually for investment, and here we're talking about private investments in the care economy to create jobs that mostly maybe can be taken up by women, but also can be taken up by men, which is unlikely. But it will create more employment for women, but also increase their ability to join the labor market. And finally, we have recommendations for research that is based specifically on these particular papers, which aim, we recommend to explore further the effects of unpaid care work on women's access to quality employment, career progression, wage equity, looking at intersectionality. You have mentioned this with factors such as education, urban, rural, socioeconomic, migration status, unpacking the effects of time spent for unpaid care work for persons with disabilities and the elderly, understanding more how public policies and workplace practices and community initiatives can mitigate. And here we need more policy impact analysis to make sure that we're actually doing and employing the right policies, just like we've seen with the telework, even though this was inconclusive actually as results, but it just shows that we need to really do that impact analysis and see the effects of the policies that we might employ that we might think are empowering, but might have a negative effect. And finally, the recommendation for more research and statistics, qualitative research, but also proper statistics by national statistics agencies to have harmonized data on workers' time use, and high frequency longitudinal data would be ideal for comparison across time and among countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rania. And building on your last recommendation, actually, we'll be talking with Deepta more about the research agenda for the future in a later session. But I'll give the floor to Rouba Al Arja from ESCWA to talk a bit about advancing care policies in the region, specifically looking at insights from new ESCWA research reports. Rouba, the floor is yours.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Actually, coming after my colleagues, I would like just 2 quick thoughts. One update, UNICEF talked about the two law bills in Lebanon. I'm happy actually to inform you that the flexible work arrangement law is adopted, and we continue working with UN Women, ILO, in order for this law to be implemented, so like the executive decrees. Also, I think what Rania presented is very important. Actually, flexible work arrangements are meant to redistribute unpaid care work. And I think what UNDP has done now is very important as benchmark, because it's very important to do these kind of studies maybe a few years later, because if women are undertaking like the majority of unpaid care work now, it will not change like very shortly. If we have flexible work arrangement, it will take some time for redistribution of unpaid care work within the household. And I think what UNDP did as research like foundation is very important for further follow-up after. Thank you. And actually, my presentation is divided into two parts. The first one is rather a call for action, concluding with one key recommendation, a very simple yet reflecting a complex reality. And the second is about sharing some insights from our research on this agenda on which we've been working since a few years. And our entry point is obviously gender equality. So everyone at every stage and moment of life needs care. And many people at different and many stages and moments in their life take on the role of caregivers. So at every moment, every one of us is either care receiver or both caregiver and care receiver at the same time, right? So this looks like clear and simple. However, if we take a quick moment to imagine, or not imagine, even look around us to see what this means in reality. Actually, you see those people, someone saying, I have a disability, but I take care of my older mother. I cannot work, I cannot travel, I take care of my father, and there are no care services in my village. I am a migrant worker. I did not know that I will be called to take care of another person. Taking care of my children, why? I'm a banker. I would like to spend more time with my children and take care of them, but no flexibility. I'm a CEO struggling to reconcile family and professional responsibility. I'm a worker. I'm working very harsh in harsh condition as nurse and barely able to meet the basic needs of my family. I divorced after 20 years of marriage and have no savings and no income. So I try to do this exercise, and also I would like you to do so. And actually, these scenarios, which are real life scenarios, very common ones, lead us to four main conclusions. The first conclusion is about gender norm, power structure, and stereotype. And I'm not talking about like the very basic one we always talk about. But for example, a person with disability might be given care. When we talk about persons with disabilities, we always see them as care receivers, which might not be the reality. A migrant worker might have or might not have or often do not have skills and competencies required to provide all types of care for older persons, for persons with disabilities, or even for children. Care struggles can be faced by CEOs. When we talk about the struggles of women, it's kind of, we're always talking about like vulnerable women with low wages, but even empowered women can struggle with provision of care. The second conclusion is about data and information, knowledge on the needs of understanding better unpaid care workers, the ability to engage in care redistribution process within household, the paid care workers, who are there, working in which conditions, in which settings. So we don't have really clarity on who is providing care, how, in which settings, in institutions, in houses, formal, informal. The third conclusion is the scope of the challenges and the policy making agenda, right, which we need to address. If we only look at the scenarios I have put, I can conclude, for example, family-friendly policies, accounting for unpaid care work in marriage and divorce, migrant workers and rights, older persons and rights for older persons and persons with disabilities, care and social infrastructure, right and working conditions for paid care workers. All these in the few scenarios I have presented. And the fourth conclusion, it's about the opportunities and benefits, because many opportunities can be available for individuals, societies, and economies, which we can reap the results if care-related policies are advanced. You know, a CEO, for example, who is able to better undertake her endeavors. A father who would be more engaged in raising children, or, for example, girls who are better able to go to school and like strive at school, the fulfillment of the rights of many categories and so on. But to be able to capitalize on all these opportunities, I don't want to say missed opportunities, but let's say potential opportunities. Obviously, it's about, we know all, advancing the care policies with the 5R, recognize, reduce, redistribute, reward, and represent, as Maha and Vasu presented in the paper, with also like the sixth one, which is about resources, also introduced by UN Women. So for us to be able really to capitalize on all this, we invite you to consider one kind of key preliminary recommendation is to start by developing strategic visions, building a knowledge on the care needs, who are the caregivers, in which national settings, what is available as services, what is available as legal frameworks, and so on and so forth. And this is leading us on the importance of a clear, well-framed and structured research agenda on care. And what I have heard from Mira this morning, Mira and I can't recall the name, sorry, like the two researchers at the beginning of this session is really impressive, and it's cheering up somehow. So this is a call, an invitation to consider having informed strategic vision, which could bring our efforts all together and help us prioritize and move forward with this agenda. Now, I'd like to move to the second part of my presentation, in which I have selected some insights from our research, just to further demonstrate the relevance of these conclusions and recommendations. And they are also food for thought for all stakeholders working on care in the region. On a survey conducted among parents using private nurseries in Lebanon, 93.4% of the 743 respondents were female. I will keep it to you to conclude. I'm just making available these insights. During the COVID-19 pandemic and the closure of daycare centers in Lebanon, 37% of parents reported relying on grandparents, primary grandmothers for child care support. So also older persons are providing care. Respondents indicated that they spent nearly 1/3 of their income on childcare, which is not little, right? Childcare significantly affects parents' life choices. In Lebanon, 32% of working parents stated that they had asked a family member to move and live with them to help with childcare due to their employment situation. Obviously, and as also Rania mentioned, and as it's clear in their studies, childcare remains largely viewed as a woman's responsibility, but the problem is it's reflecting in the in the laws, in the legal frameworks. Most workplace laws addressing childcare services are directed towards women rather than parents. So it's if in a workplace you have 100 women, then we put in place a nursery. So this is like the challenge. Legislations in 10 Arab countries only provides for paternity leave and 5 for flexible work arrangements only. In Oman, mothers of children with disabilities struggling to balance family and professional duties often cannot leave their jobs, even if they wanted, due to high cost associated with the specialized care. Only 4 Arab states have laws granting special maternity leave for parents of newborn with disabilities. So all newborns are the same, all care needed is the same, which is not the reality. In several countries, public support for elder care is limited to the most vulnerable group. And this was the case until very recently, leaving families primarily responsible for caring for older persons. Available care services tend to be standardized and lack diversity to meet various needs. We assume that it's a mother responsibility, which start working at 8 and finish working at 2. So nurseries are and childcare are following a little bit this pattern, largely in the region, we lack for different types of care, catering for different needs. Policies and strategies on older persons and persons with disabilities across the region generally focus on care recipients, offering little systematic and consistent support for caregivers themselves. So it's great that we're focusing on older persons, or persons with disabilities, but behind every person, every care receiver, there is a caregiver who is still invisible in these strategies and policies. Marriage and divorce laws fail to recognize or account for unpaid care work, as if women staying at home are not working and their work is not recognized. Promoting gender diversity in the care sector, here, actually, these are these 4 points are from a paper we published recently, but I really wanted to highlight the messages in this paper. The main message is to promote gender diversity in the care sectors, to foster equity, to foster equalities, and if I can say it this way, to pull up the sectors. Care sector, yes, it is a sector that is able to generate jobs, but it shouldn't be only for women if we want really these sectors to be inclusive, if we want to improve working conditions and create decent opportunities for all. History has showed us that sectors where there is a women concentration are harder to improve their working condition and to improve their wages. So now that we are developing and we are pushing for the development of the care sectors, let it not be a women's sector. So advanced care sectors is a prerequisite for women's participation in economy, and it's very important that these sectors are strong, solid sectors where we have a decent pay and decent working condition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rouba. I think we won't have time for the Q&A, so I'll give the floor back to Lina.
Thank you so much to everybody. And I think from the different presentation that we had, there's such a solid body of knowledge emerging from various kinds of research and investigation, and even pulse checks on care in the MENA region. So thank you, everybody. And then I'm going to take us again to the speed dating and invite our colleague and our friend, Dr. Deepta Chopra, who did an impossible task, which is bring together everything that we center and do also our research and come out with a suggestion of a research agenda on care in the MENA region based on what she saw and where were the knowledge gaps that she, this is my cat, sorry, the knowledge gaps that she identified, but also given her vast knowledge and her research on care globally. Deepta, I'm going to be very brutal in terms of time, and it's going to be, I know, very challenging for you. But again, this is just a kickoff, a relaunch on the day, International Day of Care and Caregivers. So we will have other conversations later on. So over to you, Deepta.
Thank you so much, Lina. I'm hoping that you can see my screen, and I'm just trying to make this full screen if I can. Okay, so I'm not gonna, we've heard a lot about, you know, the context, and I just wanted to put this into context that, you know, that we've heard this, that there are cultural norms, there's high female unemployment, but there's also exacerbation of inequalities in care roles, and we've heard a bit less about this, but you know, the three factors, the three C's that have really affected inequalities in care roles in the region have been COVID, conflict, and climate change. And we heard right at the start of this webinar about how you know, women dedicate significantly more time to care, but also about these intersecting inequalities. And one of the things that we heard less about was the intersection between migration and paid care workers. So you know, we know that we have challenges in the region, which include patriarchal norms and especially economic penalties of caregiving when women drop in and out of the labor force during pivotal life stages, but that there is a lack of recognition of care within the economic systems, limited state provision, but there's also things like refugee crises and gaps in regional and intersectional data on care. We've also heard a lot about the policy solutions and the 5R approach in terms of the recognition of care work as policy issues, but also investing in public services, investing in infrastructure, in terms of the reduction of the drudgery and the redistribution and the legal reforms to protect care workers, including decent work for care workers, which is the reward aspect, and finally the representation and women's leadership in the care economy. So here's where I think my main emphasis is going to be, which is sort of like, which was the sort of, you know, identifying, okay, so if we know all of this, what is it that we don't know? So in terms of what we don't know is, firstly, we know that, and we saw in the earlier studies that, you know, there is some quantitative data, but there is really a lack of like qualitative perspectives from rural and marginalized populations in terms of their own voices. And this is came across from like all of the studies that I reviewed. And some of the things that, you know, I came up with in terms of like, you know, from the research gaps that were there were, firstly, what works to change structural aspects, especially social norms behind social organization of care. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the prioritization bit, but also in terms of how macroeconomic structures and resourcing affect policy provision on care, and how do we build that political will around resourcing that we so need in the region. Finally, also things like climate change and refugee crisis and how that impacts caregiving and the social organization of care. And I was really happy to see the presentation which talked about the diversity of care needs in terms of who cares, how the impacts, but also, you know, that we are all caregivers and care receivers at the same time. And finally, how does one make, and we heard a bit more about that as well, in terms of how do we make infrastructure and social protection gender responsive and care responsive. So in my paper, I set out some questions, but then I was given the challenge of kind of thinking about, okay, so if we are going to do this research, if we're going to develop this agenda on care in the SWANA region, then what are we going to do? We have to have policy level windows of opportunity. We have to have relevance for feminist movements, especially care movements who are working on the ground with women every day. And we've got to have a very strong potential for social norm change. So I assessed all of these, and the priority research questions areas were these. So as I said, in terms of what works to change social norms, I think what is really important to understand is not just what type of interventions have successfully changed our perceptions of care roles in the region, but also really in terms of the material incentives. So behavioral change incentives, education awareness programs are one end, but material incentives, when I say material incentives, I mean things like flexible working, decent work conditions for both men and women. What are the incentives that will promote, and we can look to the Scandinavian countries to see how actually their policies predated their social change and the norm change, because when they made paternal leave, the countries who have made paternal leave compulsory are seeing the change in norms much more than the countries who still say, okay, that paternal leave is optional. But in terms of working to change social norms, there's also the idea of like how cultural, but also religious and societal beliefs influence norm change around social work, around care work, sorry. And finally, what the role is of media campaigns, because media is really important, especially for the younger generation, in terms of like how do we actually make boys and girls who are growing up actually think about care in a different way, and how does community-based initiatives also play a role in shaping these norms. The second question that was a real priority was the role of conflict and humanitarian crisis. And this is because it's really important to ensure resourcing for the provision of care policies in especially conflict, because while the demand for care is going up, the supply of care, especially in terms of services or role of the state, really does shake and become lower. So we need to think about what are the factors that will drive political will in terms of looking at the resourcing of this, how displacement and conflict disrupt traditional care arrangements, but also what coping mechanisms. And I heard some in the earlier sessions about how there are coping mechanisms, there's resilience which emerge amongst refugee and conflict affected communities. We're seeing some of that emerge already in Palestine. But how does this care responsibilities shift during and after conflict, again, not just for women but also for girls and boys? The third question that was really prioritized according to these three ideas was workable care services. And when I say workable care services, I mean models for provision of childcare, for provision of elder care, disabled care, long-term sick care, etc. And what are some of the examples of both private and public and community-based care models in the MENA region, and how these models actually address issues not only of provision of care but also of accessibility, of affordability, and of quality of care, and what are the lessons that can be learned from international care models that might be adaptable to the MENA context. The fourth question was effective care infrastructure, and by this I mean not just physical facilities but also human resources, financing mechanisms, institutional frameworks. And in this, it was also really important to think about how macroeconomic policies affect the provision of effective care infrastructure, and how can we actually reconcile that, the macroeconomic, the taxation bit, to kind of saying how does fiscal policy really impact the investments in this infrastructure approach. And finally, there was a big focus on social protection in the MENA region, and this is about existing social protection mechanisms that can be made care responsive, but also in terms of policies that can support informal care workers, including migrant and domestic workers. And we heard about, in the previous presentation about formal, about care investment in care through employers, but like what happens when there are no employers, when there's home-based work, etc., and how can therefore these frameworks of care, including like flexible work and paternal policies, be strengthened to promote shared caregiving responsibilities. And just in terms of, sorry, I just forgot about in terms of the care infrastructure, and that's my last point, is the idea of like not just how availability affects women's participation in labor force, but also in public life, and also in kind of like thinking about their leisure and their rest, because we need to recover. Women need to recover, girls need to recover, rest, and that is something that is really important to kind of say that yes, it is an investment because women will go into the labor force and girls will go into education, but it's also important to understand the importance of rest and leisure. So that's me in a nutshell, and I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation. So over back to you, Lina. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deepta, because this was what we asked you was totally an impossible endeavor, and I think you did it brilliantly. Thank you so much. I just want to tell everybody that Deepta's report, Manal's report, Mira's report, and also the initial scoping that we did during this first phase are all on our website, and you can find them really easily in our care. There's a care page on our website. So thank you all so much. And there's also information about the Global Alliance for Care and about the MENA Working Group on care. I'm very mindful of time, and I will take maybe one or two tops comments. Yes, thank you. Carla has given the link in the chat to all this material. Is there any burning point or comment or question? Because otherwise I will move us to very quick closing remarks while reminding all of us that this is a very quick kickoff conversation, and then we will have a plan for the remaining year and for 2026. So if not, I sound like the webinar bully. Maha, tfaddali.
Yeah. No, I mean, Deepa, thank you so much, Deepta. This is such a valuable research and recommendations. And I wonder if maybe we can send this out to the participants of this group that has now been relaunched in maybe some kind of a poll, just to get a sense of where people, feel we can prioritize. I know that working with UNDP, AUB, UNICEF, we've already identified climate and care. Maybe we need to expand it to look at shock responsive care for the paper that we're preparing this year for December. But perhaps we can do some kind of a prioritization exercise to get people's feedback as we chart the research agenda. Thanks.
Thank you, Maha. And I think one of the things that we wanted out of this convening is to all be together and to all be on the same page. And I think this, for sure, we have achieved it. Can I move us quickly into just some closing reflections, which are not necessarily prepared, but which inspired you? So let me change the order a bit and ask Maha, Rania, and Anette for quick kind of closing reflections, and then I will close the conversation. Maha, do you want to start?
Yeah, no, I just, my reflection is it's true, we've made progress, but we have so much to learn from Latin America, from South Asia, and really having this kind of partnership between UN agencies, civil society, universities is so critical at this time. And finding ways also maybe in our webinars to include League of Arab States, the African Union, so that we can have that policy dialogue as well. Thanks so much, Lina and Carla and colleagues.
Maha, thank you. I mean, for this collaboration also, and it hasn't started a long time ago with Maha and Rania. It was after a conversation in Jordan earlier this year. So I'm really thankful for this. Rania, tfaddali.
Thank you so much, Lina. And well, first, I also want to say congratulations on the celebration of the International Day of Care. These days, we hesitate to use the word celebration, maybe recognition of the International Day of Care and support. And to thank you, Lina, for bringing us together. I think it's great to have this conversation started, and I hope that we will continue, that we will have this platform as a sustained mechanism for engagement on a research and also policy agenda. I think the research priorities, especially the framing that Deepta has shared, makes a lot of sense. From the UN agency side, we're also going to work collaborating together on the care agenda. We will be working together towards the regional roadmap, hopefully soon, on care that Annette has mentioned. Yeah, maybe just to say that we will have a couple of reflection sessions on this UN policy document on the comprehensive care framework, as well as another topic in the coming period before end of year. So thank you very much. And it's really wonderful to see everyone and to be collaborating with all of you.
Thank you, Rania. Annette, your closing reflections and thoughts?
Yeah, again, thank you for convening us. Yeah, I think it's really time that we bring everybody and everything together and stop, working in our little silos. There is so much to learn. This was such rich research, so I can't actually wait for the next time. And we need to, of course, enlarge the group as well, because it's a little sad that there are not many more people actually listening to what you have brought together. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Annette. And I just want to point out to what's going to happen. First of all, we're sharing with you all, everybody who registered for the webinar. I have to say something that's also being broadcasted on the Global Alliance for Care channel, which is compiling everything that is happening globally today. And it's being broadcasted and it will stay there for further reference. But we will also share with you the link because we recorded this conversation. So first we're sharing with you the link. Carla has already shared the links to all the full researches. We will work with the panelists just to consolidate all the short presentations so that we're sharing it with you. And then we will begin with the follow-up program, which includes a series of learning and capacity building webinars that we are developing together. Also, we're taking forward Deepta's research framework and trying to see where do we start and with which research questions, because I think, as you said, Maha, she's done an amazing framing. And you can expect from us a convening for a work session for the working group in early 2026. So thank you all. I'm really grateful to each and every one of you, and we will see you soon. Thank you all so very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you,
everybody.
colleagues. Have a good evening. Thank you for the opportunity.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
See
Thank
you
you.
soon.
Bye.